Hi, here we are with the first essay of the semester on Romanticism. This is the Romanticism essay prompt. In other words, these are the instructions or directions for writing the first essay this semester. So as we go through this, please pay careful attention. If you have any questions, if anything is not clear after reading the prompt and watching this video, please contact me. Do not hesitate to send me an email or a message through the Canvas message inbox system. So here we are. Choose one of the following topics and construct an argumentative essay based on research and your own close reading of the primary text. Now, primary text means the actual work of the authors. So, for instance, like a poem by William Blake would be the primary text. Okay, that's what we mean by that term. So the first option says pick either William Blake or William Wordsworth and describe how his poetry serves to bring together humanity and nature. Please note the capitalization of nature here. It's very deliberate. Use at least two of the poems from the syllabus if you choose Blake, or one poem from the syllabus if you choose Wordsworth. And by the way, I mean that, right? Stick to the poems on the syllabus. Don't fly off in any other directions. You will not get as high of a grade if you do. So the issue of humanity and nature is crucial with the Romantics and, well, probably most evident with either Blake or Wordsworth. Right? If you're not familiar with what we're talking about or what I'm talking about here, please, of course, make sure that you read the prefatory material in our textbook by Greenblatt. Second option, how does Mary Wollstonecraft's A Vindication of the Rights of Woman, and by the way, woman, right, singular, as a parallel to Vindication of the Rights of Man, anticipate the suffrage movement of the late 19th and early 20th century, the second wave women's movement of the 1970s, and today's third wave women's movement? You may also wish to consider in what ways have the women's rights movements moved away from Wollstonecraft. Okay, so suffrage, if you're not familiar with that term, suffrage is about the right to vote. Okay, so this was the movement that really, in the late 19th and early 20th century, women were most pushing for was the right to vote. Okay, which eventually, of course, was achieved. The second wave women's movement is the movement in the 1970s, and that is a lot about opening up institutions, breaking down the walls that say no women, and say no, why not? Right? Women in law school, medical school, women at Harvard and Yale, women in the West Point and Annapolis, right? The military academies. Women moving into not just education, but also work fields, so on and so forth. The third wave women's movement, which is a little harder to define, to be perfectly frank about it, but it's now pushing beyond the idea of access, right? Whereas before, okay, now you got women going to Harvard, you have women going to med school. You have women who can vote now and run for president and, so forth and so on. The third wave women's movement, and by the way, there are some people who argue there is already a fourth wave, but I think that's maybe splitting hairs a little bit, have other areas of interest that, well, I don't want to give too much stuff away, but you should explore and research. You may also wish to consider in what ways have the women's rights movements moved away from Wollstonecraft. So if you look at what Wollstonecraft has been saying and writing about in her Vindication, it might be that you might find certain issues have been, well, met, shall we say, satisfied, and they've moved on. Or you could say, no, today we're looking at things in a different way than what Wollstonecraft thought or looked at. The next question, how is the figure of the Byronic hero influenced later, including contemporary, that would be like right now, figures, both fictional and historical? Cite specific examples and how their lineage can be traced to Byron. So the Byronic hero is a term that you need to read about. Again, it's in the prefatory notes to Byron in our textbook. Basically, the Byronic hero is, you might almost call him an anti-hero, although I'm not 100% sure he fits with a classic anti-hero picture either. But the Byronic hero is the rebel, right? The Byronic hero rejects society, right? That makes him very different from a traditional hero, right? He rejects society. He rejects the mores, the rules, the laws, the morality of mainstream society that he basically walks away from. I mean, the Byronic hero is often a loner by necessity. The Byronic hero leaves his or her place of origin, can't stay, right? They have to go, whether it's because of their own volition or because they're forced to leave. The Byronic hero is a fascinating character, and arguably you might kind of call him the first rock star, right? If you think about, for me, I think of the classic, I want the world and I want it now scream. That's Jim Morrison of the Doors, by the way. There is something about the Byronic hero in that. Okay. Final question. John Keats coined the term negative capability and ascribed it as a goal for writers, claiming that, for example, this was a great achievement of Shakespeare's. Now, the term negative capability you will see in his letter. Okay, you have a letter to be read. I know it's awkward reading other people's mail, right? But he talks about negative capability as essentially the author isn't pushing you or causing you to embrace or reject, but rather simply absorbing or being present in contradictions without trying to resolve those contradictions, right? Part of the notion of negative capability is the idea of hiding the author, right? That, for instance, like in Shakespeare, his argument would be you don't really know much about Shakespeare when you read Shakespeare. That is to say, you don't know much about Shakespeare, the person. Shakespeare, the man who lived in a certain time and place, right? As opposed to a lot of writing, which is very, well, you can feel the writer pushing us in one direction or another. Right? That's far more common than the opposite. Examine at least one of the odes of Keats. Right? So we have the great odes are in the book. Ode on Melancholy, Ode to Psyche, Ode on a Grecian Urn, Ode on a Nightingale, Ode on Indolence. And examine how Keats attempts to reach negative capability. So if he's ascribed this as a goal, how does he do? You may wish to consider also whether this should be, in fact, a standard for greatness in a writer. Right? This is obviously not something that everybody agrees with. The paper is due to be submitted to Canvas by Tuesday, July 5th. So you have 2 weeks from today at 11:59 p.m. Be sure to follow the out-of-class essay guidelines for matters of form and style. Now, the out-of-class essay guidelines sheet you will find on Canvas. Go to the modules. Okay, look it up. You'll see it under the modules. There is both the handout itself and a video that I've made to go with it. Use correct MLA documentation as described in the MLA for Literature class handout, again on Canvas. or the current MLA handbook, should you happen to own it. Be sure to include a word count at the end of your essay. That's always very easy to find, right? It should be anyway. Remember, you must meet minimum requirements, including word count, sources, and subject matter. No late essays will be accepted without a verifiable medical or legal excuse. Okay, so we kind of move things along pretty quickly here. Now, what are the minimum requirements? What is the least that I expect you to do? First of all, your essays should run somewhere between 1,000 to 1,400 words. Okay, that little squiggly line in front of 14 means approximately. At least that's how I remember my math. You can go longer if you wish, as long as, I like to say, you're not boring. Okay, so if you really need to use more space, more words, then go ahead and do that. If you're short of 1,000 words, however, I'm not going to be too fond of that, because that suggests to me that you haven't really deeply thought through what's going on. You need citations from at least 4 different sources. One of the sources must be the primary text, right? The poem or work that you're using. 2 sources at least must be from scholarly works, such as dissertations, peer-reviewed journal articles, or university press books. The 4th source can be a source of your own choosing, but it must be a credible analytical source in its own right, not a piece of junk. The textbook only counts as primary text, although you may certainly use the editorial materials in your essay. Now, can you have more? Yes. That's why we're calling these minimum requirements. You can always have more than 4 sources. A lot of my students seem to somehow get the mistaken impression that they can only use 4. That is not my intention. So there you saw that bullet point. You may have more than these 4 sources. And again, please, MLA format and presentation and documentation, including correct works cited. So if you have any questions, you have any issues, you don't understand something, or you want to kind of ask me about one of these questions, please do. Please do. Do not hesitate to contact me. I want to make sure everybody understands what's going on. Thank you.